We all start somewhere different. Maybe it was a beat-to-hell Camaro that burned more oil than gas. Maybe it was a WRX with a head gasket that gave up on life twice before you finished making payments. Maybe it was some forgotten Honda with dreams bigger than its pathetic compression ratio and a body kit held together by zip ties and a little bit of hope. But if you go deep enough into this car thing, if you really commit to the obsession, the road always leads to the same place. Not because Porsche is the fastest, not because it's the flashiest or the loudest or the one that turns the most heads at Cars and Coffee, but because the moment you actually drive one, something clicks in your brain and you realize, oh, this is what I've been chasing all along. This is the journey every real car enthusiast goes through before they finally understand the 911. And if you're honest with yourself, you're already on this path, you just don't know where it ends yet. Let me take you back to that first car that made you feel something. Now, for some of you, it was a V6 Mustang sitting crooked in a high school parking lot. The rear tires, 2 different brands because that's all you could afford. For others, it was a Subaru with equal length headers that sounded like it was having an existential crisis every time you hit 4,000 RPM. Maybe it was that rusty Civic with an exhaust system that cost more than the car was worth and a cold air intake that definitely, absolutely, totally added 15 horsepower. These cars were objectively terrible. The Mustang couldn't turn, the Subaru leaked every fluid it contained, the Civic had more holes in the floorboard than a Swiss cheese factory, but here's the thing, they were alive. They had character, personality, they demanded something from you every single time you turned the key. That first car taught you the most important lesson you'll ever learn in this world. Feeling beats logic every single time. It doesn't matter what the spec sheet says, it doesn't matter what your dad thinks, it doesn't matter if Consumer Reports gave it 1 star for reliability. If it makes you feel something when you drive it, if it makes you take the long way home just to hear the engine one more time, then it's doing exactly what it's supposed to. This was your drug, and like any good drug, it made you want more. Which brings us to the next phase of the journey, the one where everything goes slightly off the rails. So you got deeper into it. You discovered forums. You learned what bolt-ons meant. You started saying things like "with a tune" as if those 3 words could justify any purchase decision. Suddenly, your vocabulary expanded to include cold air intakes, catback enthusiasts, downpipes, boost controls, dyno sheets that you'd print out and carry around like they were medical degrees. You became a bench racer. You'd argue for hours about whether a Turbo K-Series or an LS swap made more sense for a Miata, despite never having built either one. You know everyone's trap speed at the quarter mile. You could quote horsepower figures for cars you'd never even driven, never sat in, and never seen in person. But man, you knew the numbers. And for a while, horsepower felt like progress. More power equals better, right? So you saved up. Maybe you bought that turbo kit. Maybe you went with the supercharger, or maybe you just did bolt-ons and a tune and convinced yourself you could feel the extra 23 horses. And then you drove it, really drove it, tried to push it through a proper corner, and that's when you discovered something terrifying. Your 500 wheel horsepower build couldn't take an off-ramp without threatening to rotate you into another dimension. The power came on like someone flipped a light switch while you were wearing a blindfold. The chassis twisted like it was made out of cardboard. The brakes, that were perfectly fine for 200 horsepower, were now just decorative suggestions for slowing down. You'd created a monster, and I don't mean the good kind. But here's what's funny. While you were chasing those dyno numbers, there was this whole other world you didn't know existed. A world where a Porsche GT2 RS made 700 horsepower and could lap the Nürburgring faster than cars with twice the power. Where a Turbo S could do 0 to 60 in less time than your trap speed and then immediately go pick up groceries without drama. Where Singer was building turbocharged DLS cars that made 500 plus horsepower and somehow still felt like precision instruments instead of runaway trains. And that's when the second revelation hit you. Horsepower is nothing if the car can't actually use it. It happened in one corner, just one. Could have been a freeway on-ramp you'd taken 1,000 times, or maybe it was a mountain road or an autocross course where you finally worked up the courage to actually try. But there was this one moment where everything suddenly made sense. Grip, Balance, feedback, weight transfer, these weren't just words nerds used on forums, they were real things you could feel through the steering wheel, through the seat, through the way the car communicated what it was about to do before it did it. You discovered that suspension geometry was a thing, that tire compound mattered more than tire width, that corner balancing wasn't something you did to your diet, it was something you did to your car. You learned words like coilovers and sway bars and alignment specs, and suddenly they meant something beyond just parts you could buy. And then you watched a stock Cayman GTS, a base Porsche that purists claim isn't even a real Porsche, that passed a McLaren at the Nürburgring. The McLaren was faster in the straights, had more power, more aero, more everything, but in the technical sections, that Cayman was surgical, precise, efficient. It wasn't trying to overpower the corner, it was trying to solve it. Your brain melted a little bit, I'm sure. You started going down a different rabbit hole. You watched the videos of the 997 GT3 and people talked about steering feel like it was a religious experience. You discovered the 981 Cayman and learned that some people actually preferred it to the 911 because the mid-engine balance was that good. You saw what Porsche did with the 918 Weissach package and realized they were playing a completely different game than everyone else. These weren't just fast cars, they were thinking fast cars. Engineering first and ego second. And that changed everything about what you wanted. So, you pivoted. You stopped caring about what impressed other people and started chasing what impressed you. You drove cars for sensation instead of speed, for connection instead of clout. You got a Miata, and yeah, everyone made jokes. It's a hairdresser's car, it's so slow. Why would you buy that? But then you took it on a back road and understood why it's the answer. Not because it's fast, but because it's right. The steering talks to you. The shifter feels like it's connected to the transmission by a solid metal rod because it basically is. The weight is so low, you can carry momentum through corners that would require actual talent in a heavier car. Maybe you tried an S2000, the Scalpel. 9,000 RPM of naturally aspirated fury, a chassis that rewarded precision and punished sloppiness, VTEC crossover that felt like the car shifted into a different dimension. It demanded perfection, and when you gave it perfection, it gave you transcendence. Or maybe you went for an E46 M3, the legend, the one BMW that every enthusiast points to as the moment they peaked. That S54 engine screaming to 8,000 RPM, the hydraulic steering that let you feel every pebble in the road, the balance that made you feel like a hero even when you were driving like an idiot. This was your era of purity. You wanted the noise to be music, not just volume. You wanted steering to be communication, not just a way to point the front wheels. You wanted the car to be a partner, not a weapon. You just didn't realize yet that these were all training wheels. They were practice. They were all building towards something because everything you loved about these cars, the balance, the feedback, the communication, the precision, Porsche had been refining it for 60 years. And then it happened. You drove a 911 for the first time. Maybe it was a rental on vacation. Maybe it was a test drive you barely qualified for. Maybe it was a friend's car and they finally trusted you enough to throw you the keys. It doesn't matter how it happened, it just matters that it did. And here's the thing. There were no fireworks, no dramatic music, no moment where angels descended from heaven and a voice boomed, "This is it." It was quieter than that, more subtle. You got in, adjusted the seat, fired it up, and started driving, and within 5 minutes, something clicked. The steering felt predictive, not just responsive, but predictive. Like the car knew where you wanted to go before you finished the thought. The throttle response felt organic instead of algorithmic. You weren't waiting for a computer to decide if you really meant to press the pedal. The engine responded immediately, naturally, like it was an extension of your right foot. The chassis balance felt like someone had studied you for 30 years. Studied how you think, how you react, how you want a car to behave when you're pushing it. The weight in the back meant the car rotated differently than everything else you'd driven, but it wasn't scary. It was intuitive. The car told you what it was going to do before it did it, and then it did exactly that. You weren't fighting the car, you weren't managing the car, you were collaborating with it. You drove a 997 and understood why people talk about hydraulic steering like it's sacred. You drove a 991 and realized that electronic power steering doesn't have to be numb if you actually care about engineering it properly. Trying to be the car that makes sense when you actually think about what matters. And after years of chasing noise, power, chaos, drama, flex, and clout, right is the thing you didn't know you needed. That's why every path leads here. Not because Porsche is objectively perfect, because it's not at all. But it's because Porsche figured out what actually matters and then refused to compromise on it.